Right, I think we've left it enough time to allow the rest of our guests to join. So welcome everyone. Good morning to you all. Thank you very much for joining us today for the first of our three-part webinar series. These are supposed to be short, sharp bites, so me and Matt will try and be as succinct as we possibly can be. The first in this is around incident response and why it's a make or break scenario that's now not just affecting from the technology side, but more business side of things as well. From a housekeeping perspective, just to get all of that out of the way, this session is recorded. We sent out and followed up with this afterwards as well. There'll be a Q&A session at the end. Obviously, if there's anything you want to raise or talk about, then we're always here to help. So for anyone who doesn't know who we are, so PureCyber, been around since 2016 now, and within our organization we cover three pillars of cybersecurity. So that is the offensive side of security, the defensive side of security, which is Matt's area, and the governance side of security as well. So I've got myself, John, as the Chief Information Risk Officer on today's webinar, and also Matt, who is our Chief Defensive Security Officer. So you should have a good view of somebody who likes to prep and plan and create that sort of structure, and then Matt, who is usually in the thick of things when it comes to responding to incidents and getting organizations back up on their feet. From an agenda side of things today, what we're going to look at is what incident response is, what happens during an incident, what does good look like, and how do incident response simulations work, and what's the best way of testing them. And as I said, we'll have a Q&A session at the end. What I will try and do is I'll try and get through the first sort of slides around what instant response is, quicker than I usually would. And then we can get on to Matt's interesting work around sort of incidents he's been involved in, which should give you a real good insight into it and sort of the emotions and the impact it can have. And then we can wrap up with a bit more around what a good process looks like and what organizations should be doing. I said, so from a very high level point of view, so incident response, it's all around the preparation, detection, containment, recovery, and then the post-incident activity as well. This is technically what an incident response cycle should look like. So preparation, so have you got the controls in place to make sure that you are prepared for incidents, and you're able to monitor sort of situations, understand how it could potentially happen. Detecting them again just falls into that monitoring piece a bit more. Have you got your alerts set up? Have you configured sort of security controls in place to make sure that you're able to identify when you're having an incident? Containment and recovery is where Matt's will kicks in, and is able to sort of isolate systems, stop the problem from spreading and escalating. And then that post-incident activity is really important to help and identify root causes, what could have potentially been the issue, and how you can, again, improve your preparation from the next time, which hopefully wouldn't be a next time, so that you can then respond to that incident in a more efficient way. And as it says there, 43% of all UK businesses reported breaches in the last 12 months, which is quite a shocking figure when you think of it like that. And obviously they could be small, they could be major, but it just shows that actually from an instant perspective, it affects everyone, and it isn't just a big household name problem. We'll come on to that now, because as you probably see, and I'll bring Matt in to chat about these. Obviously, there's quite a lot of incidents that have been around in the news recently. These are some of the ones that we've picked out. I say recently, these slides were done as a caveat before Jaguar Land Rover, the airports across the weekend as well. BMW is another one. But I mean, Matt, obviously you read up a lot about these. Do you want to talk us through some of the ones that are seen here?
Yeah, so SalesLoft, that was quite a recent one and quite a massive impact for a lot of kind of big names out there. So SalesLoft was a kind of a chat AI bot that would sit on the website used for like support tokens as well. The issue with that was as part of its security, it got compromised on one of the integrations into Salesforce, which a lot of these big companies use, had their kind of security compromised, which affected companies like Palo Alto, Zscaler, I think Workforce Salesforce is one of them. So a lot of these big names had their data exposed. If any of their customers put it into that chatbot, it would have been released. Very recently, we've had Jaguar Land Rover. So far, they're still in the middle of it. I think it came out today. They're going to be down for another month. I think it's estimated it's going to be just over £900 million in cost to them. And then we've also had the airport incidents over the weekend where Collins Aerospace, which is a piece of software that the kiosks use when you go into those airports, was actually compromised, which meant if you were trying to check in to go onto a flight in those affected airports, it would severely delay you, and even most of the flights were cancelled due to it. And the kind of highest impact as well of this being that when a ransomware case happens, we've seen it in KMP. So KMP was a logistics company. They've been around for about 150 years, had a ransomware attack in, I think it was 23, 24, and now recently reported, I think back in July, that they've now gone into administration because they couldn't actually recover from the downtime that they lost.
That's right. I think that came from just 1 week password, wasn't it, KMP, Matt?
Exactly that. Yeah, that pretty much destroyed the entire company, but I think it was around 700 people out of work.
Obviously, why they're becoming more newsworthy now, aren't they? These incidents, obviously, if it hits the bigger ones, but sometimes you think of, I suppose the Peter Green one always sort of sticks with me well, the M&S one especially, because you have M&S obviously had a huge impact, huge incident. Probably will recover because they've got a lot of the resource to be able to, but there'll be a lot of their supply chain and things like that which will be affected because M&S has been down for so long, and it could be similar from a Jaguar Land Rover perspective as well, couldn't it?
Yeah, so that I think Jaguar Land Rover are seeing most of their suppliers either not being able to pay any of their staff or going out of business because obviously they're ordering equipment pretty much when they need it. So because they don't need anything right now, they're not getting any money for those sales. So yeah, it's going to be a big impact across the board.
Yeah, exactly. And then sort of so we can make this session as interactive as possible, what we wanted to do as well is ask you all a few questions. So again, these can all come in. On a scale of 1 to 10, obviously add into the chat. I believe I'm looking at my marketing team now. In terms of how confident you would be in your ability to respond to an incident. There should be a poly that's just come through now. Obviously, we just want to get everyone's thoughts and see how confident people are really. Just waiting for the poly to load from the looks of things. If anything, you could say this was planned so we could experience an incident on the webinar, but just little technical issues. There you go. Okay. So in terms of what we've got coming through there now,
Quite a mix.
what a mix, yeah. Only one person who submitted would be very confident in what they do. The majority are somewhat confident, so I imagine there is a rough sort of plan in place, but probably could do with looking at that. Okay. Interesting. And then when it comes through from our side of things and sort of the next slide that we've got across here, how many people have got a documented incident response policy, incident response plan that includes senior leaders and covers all aspects of the organization? It's another thing that we always stress with incident response, and it's something we've referenced at the start. It's not just a IT issue. It is a complete company-wide plan and process that should be in place. Again, bit of a mixed bag there again, isn't it? So 50-50, slightly favouring the more negative response there as to what people have got, which is interesting to see. And I think this is where, so if you follow on from those questions and something that Matt is going to dive into as well. Obviously, like I said at the start, Matt sees or is involved and helps out in quite a lot of incidents. Gets the sort of the Ghostbusters call or the red phone straight to Matt's mobile, to help people navigate incidents and help them to recover and come out of it, at least with some sort of business in place, really. So what I'll do is I'll hand over to you, Matt, to run through this. But I think I'll lead with the sort of, unless you wanted to go, Matt, and lead with that first sort of question. And
Yeah,
help
yeah.
people go
Like,
through it.
yeah. So before we move on to really what this question is going to be based off, just want to introduce the kind of overall topic and case study we'll be looking at. So as a scenario, you walk back into your business, back into the office, and every single screen, your printers have got these ransomware notes printed out, and you can't access anything. What would you do? What is the first kind of action based off that, really? It's a lot of people have different kind of scenarios, different things they would do first. I think we'll probably drop something in the chat. I'm not too sure. But I think most everyone they'll start using the plan. But John, if you can do one more slide for me. So what we would usually see is everyone would probably say, well, in this scenario, we would initiate the plan, right? But it really isn't like that. What the usually issue is and the actions are is you usually panic. You usually probably be quite upset. And you will experience every one of these emotions, unfortunately. I always remember one back in 2020 where he's probably one of my first kind of cases, and this big burly Welsh man, and you'd never expect him to be doing this, but he was an absolute mess, crying on the end of the phone, and actually in a Teams chat. And it does take you really by shock, but at the end of the day, this person's most likely or could lose his business over just one action on the network that has caused everything to go down. So John, if you can do one more slide for me. So this incident that took place probably happened around, God, it might have been last year, the year before, where a medical company got all of their machines ransomwared by Lockbit. So Lockbit were kind of the biggest kind of ransomware group back in 2024. A lot of the victims were from them, and they had ransomware every single machine that they had in an organization. So they came in through, they had a, I'm trying to think what they had. They had a Citrix box, so a remote access gateway, how their employees accessed all their files and work if they were working from home. But unfortunately, they weren't, it wasn't being updated. And I think I might have said this a couple of times in previous webinars, but when it was questioned why it wasn't updated, their response was it was the latest and greatest kind of version at that time, which was a bit of a joke, really, when it was such a critical part of their network. Once the attackers actually got through that vulnerability, that Lockbit were actually publicly known to be exploiting, they were able to then compromise the rest of the network. So they compromised that remote network, so all the machines and servers that sat in that Citrix environment, because that also had a connection back to the physical network. They were able to compromise using the same kind of credentials and tools that they were using there. The rest of the kind of company, but also, unfortunately for them, their IT manager had a remote desktop connection sitting on his machine, and they were able to get in then to their actual sister company, where they ransomwared every single machine of theirs as well. So I think there's about 40 to 50 devices affected, just over a terabyte of information exposed. This information obviously being quite sensitive PII, of medical records, employee information. So probably the worst it could be in these incidents, and quite a critical case. So an immediate notification to ICO was obviously put out. And I think something just to go back to as well, as part of this incident, to contain it, they obviously didn't talk about it with a lot of people. So it was quite a close circle of people who knew what was happening. Obviously, they couldn't hide too much, but as a kind of tactic by these ransomware groups, they will try and cause panic as much as possible. That's why you'll have the wallpapers with the messages, you'll have the printers printing out ransomware notes. Another tactic used by this group was that they actually phoned the company. So they wouldn't phone anyone high up, they phoned kind of low level reception, call center staff to say, well, look, we've got your data. You might want to tell your bosses to do something about it. And I believe they also emailed the call center staff with their passports to say, well, look, we have your information. And it's all there really to cause pressure on the kind of executives to, well, reach out, negotiate, and pay this group really moving forward. Immediately on kind of them finding out what was happening, they contacted us straight away because obviously they're not really going to know the full process. They didn't really have a full kind of instant response plan in place. They kind of knew what to do. They obviously phoned up their IT company first, which didn't really offer them too much in terms of forensic help. They could try and have a look to see what was going on, but they were a bit out of their depth, and that's why they wanted us to come on board to really understand what's happened. And this is some of the issues that we see, unfortunately, that companies will want to get back to working state really quickly, and we've seen that happen kind of too many times where they haven't identified that first point of compromise, and unfortunately, they will just get ransomware again and again. And the long-term effects, I suppose, is this company now, so they also had to notify the ICO. They were fortunate due to them actually communicating them straight away. So we advised them to really reach out and engage the ICO immediately because they usually prefer that than rather you just coming along, especially outside that 72-hour window that you're meant to be contacting them. So they were okay from that point of view. I don't believe there was any kind of big fines involved because they put all the controls in place. I think the biggest effect was reputational. Their clientele had to be told that their medical data was sitting on the dark web. Their employees not really trusting the company anymore because their passports, their national insurance number, bank details were again sitting on the dark web for potentially anyone to use, and the company had to pay for credit monitoring. So if you are affected, one of the advice is to have credit monitoring set up for all employees, just in case any fraud is attempted on their behalf. The kind of next slide now we'll be looking at is what are those common patterns that we see in terms of maybe potential mistakes that are caused. And unfortunately, and you will see it, people panic. People don't know what to do. And the first two real points are the same in the sense of if you panic, you're going to do stuff that you shouldn't have really done, like turning off machines, or maybe contacting the wrong people, not engaging us or a company quick enough. We say and we advise not to turn off a machine if you possibly can, just because of it loses that forensic data. So a lot of the data that potentially we will use is sitting in memory that as soon as you turn off that device, we will lose. So if you can keep the device online, but kind of take it off the network, take the network card out or just unplug the Ethernet cable if it's that easy, that is kind of the advice that I would give. But if you are unsure, turn it off if you have to. We wouldn't want it to spread, but that's what kind of I would say, in my experience, you should be doing, because the more information you can give us or another company when they're carrying out your forensics, potentially quicker you'll actually get back to recovering and get back to normal working. Again, I kind of covered off not getting help quick enough, but also being unprepared. A lot of people don't know what to do as soon as that ransomware notification happens, and it doesn't have to be ransomware. It could just be someone being compromised on Microsoft 365. It could be someone taking the wrong data. there's multiple different versions of an incident, and not being prepared for them is a common issue that we see across businesses. And I suppose I also wanted to cover off when we were discussing what we were going to cover in this webinar, what are the unexpected impacts people don't foresee actually happen. And unfortunately, I have the view into companies at their worst possible state. And what I usually see is that mental health impact, the team struggling, they're working long hours under high pressure from um, boards, it could be executives. People want their data back. People want their computers back online and want to get back to work straight away. And unfortunately, these processes can take a while, and all of that pressure can really wear out the IT teams, senior leadership teams. And it's just something to really take note of when you're creating your incident response plans. And John will kind of quickly talk over this after, but is to note about kind of how you align resource during these incidents, how you working out shifts. Yes, the first day is a bit mad, but then you've got to be kind of scheduling who's working where, what they're working on, so they don't get burnt out. A big thing we see as well is company morale, right? At the end of the day, if your ransomware or incident is quite publicly known, I couldn't imagine how it's been at like Jaguar Land Rover, M&S, where you're behind the scenes trying to get everything on. You've got all these different pressures, and you're actually being asked by everyone that you know what's going on. The morale really drops for the company. So it's making sure you take note on how potentially you can improve that. Dealing with internal pressures, obviously, internal and external stakeholders will cause unneeded pressure during these times. So again, it's having people to really be that firewall between you and them during these incidents to take that away. Reputational damage, a lot of people think about the financial impact of these incidents. And yes, obviously, if you look at the logistics company that we were talking about a few seconds ago, it it can impact. But if people know you're not looking after your data securely, and it could just be a simple mistake that's caused these incidents, then nobody's going to buy services, nobody's going to have that service from you again. And it's just considering how do you deal with that reputational damage and really engaging with your suppliers and customers as soon as possible. And again, we've kind of covered off the stakeholder and customer pressures. So in terms of then the common incident types, we talked a lot there really around ransomware, malware incidents, but it's not just those really that we deal with on a daily basis. Internal compromise, it could be kind of user X being kind of sacked, or they're not happy in that company and they decide to take a load of files and they walk away. It could be what I see very commonly now is business email compromise. So if you're going to have an incident, this is where it's most likely going to come from. It's where a user probably clicks on a phishing link, submits their credentials, and it bypasses your security, and you've got a threat actor then sitting on your email doing whatever they want, and most likely sending a bunch more emails to a lot more people and their contacts, which really is not a financial impact, but more reputational of, right, okay, this company's had an incident and everyone knows quite quickly. And really something that we see now, and everyone sees in the media, is supply and third parties. If you look at the airport incidents, that's all caused by a third party, potentially not having their security as tight as they should. And to be honest, I think most publicly known incidents right now are probably caused by some sort of supplier or third party not being as secure as they should be. So we're going to now move on to kind of John and kind of how to really start to, what does good look like in terms of incident response and how do you prepare for that?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Matt. And again, we'll hold on to that supplier thought because a little bit of a promo. Next webinar coming up is all around suppliers and due diligence. So where these incidents are affecting supply chains massively, having that sort of webinar as well be really interesting because we will feed into this and how, like Matt said, creating that strong security, I suppose, posture around your supply chain will help to ultimately stop or mitigate potential incidents from a supplier point of view. But as Matt said, sort of what does good look like? I think there's a lot of emphasis around instant response and plans and playbooks, which is, as I said, is pretty crucial, really. Having a plan in place, having a playbook that people can grab. So, yes, as an IT team, you might have knowledge around what to do, but what happens if you're not there? Who picks up that work? You know, who deputizes for you to do it? So, having a plan in place so that, as Matt said, if key people are on annual leave, you know what to do. If there's a key person who's dealing with a particular supplier, they know what to do. You know, you can't. I think this is something that people struggle with from my experience is instant response plans. If you thought about every potential incident you could have, you would have a 70-page booklet around instant response, which when an incident happens, nobody's going to read, nobody's going to check over it. It's about having something that is concise and clear and pointed because I mean, Matt knows this. Every incident, even though they might be business email compromise, it might be supply chain, it might be ransomware, every particular incident around those are going to vary in some degree. So you can't plan for every eventuality, but it's knowing key people, what to do, how to do it, and where to act fast. Again, with those plans and playbooks and the preparation behind them, are they stored locally? Do you have copies of them elsewhere? What are you doing to then, obviously if 365 was to go down, your playbooks are in there. What do you do then? It's about planning for every potential eventuality, but not overloading yourselves too much. The testing side of things is really, really key as well. So if you've got a plan, that's great, but have you tested it? Have you gone for a simulation to say, right, actually, this does work for us, or we need to tweak a little bit here, we need to move this? Again, it's just having that sort of organic review of your instant response processes and plans just to make sure that they're still valid and work or whether they need to be changed slightly. Obviously, from an extra help point of view, is what you've got in place. Do you have people you can call on? Do you know what to do in an incident um, rather than like Matt said, having that initial panic, what to do? If you have a plan, you know roughly what to do. As I said, every incident is potentially different, but you have some sort of structure that you can go with and follow through, which will help you when you're trying to make these business decisions, because that's what they all are. They're all business decisions at the end of the day of how you respond to an incident, what you bring up first, which obviously rolls into business continuity, but they're all going to impact in a slightly different way. One of the questions that we've got as well here, which I'll send through now and see if it works through Polly, is one of the really, really simple things is when was the last time you tested your backups? I appreciate this kind of goes into business continuity, but if you think of incidents and you think of sort of ransomware that Matt sees or supply chain, anything like that, where does that come from? What sort of structure have you got in place to know, okay, yeah, we have been ransomware. Okay, not ideal, never going to be ideal, but we can recover quickly. It's going to take us 3 hours, 4 hours to get our main systems back online. And then that informs your communication piece out to internal comms, external comms to say, right, this is how long it's going to be. I mean, slightly worrying with some of those that have been answered there is that the never last year. So again, it's stuff like that. But you'd think, well, I think having a look at it and saying, well, actually, what does good look like? Testing that as regularly as you
Just
can do. Like,
just to add
go on,
on to
sorry,
that,
Matt.
John, I think, part of the case that I was on, they tested their backups, but they didn't test all of them. So yeah, they tested restoring a document back into their OneDrive or I don't know, some sort of medical piece of data, but they never actually tested how they would recover their SQL database. And that's where they fell down. They were really confident initially saying, well, we don't need to pay the ransomware actors because we've got everything we need. And when they went to recover their databases, unfortunately, when they went to turn it all back on, it was all corrupt. So they actually had to go to the ransomware actors and actually pay them for those files, unfortunately. So it's making sure you're testing everything you have, not just some of it.
I'll never forget. Was it I think it was one of Damon's little stories and analogies, was a law firm from years ago who spent 100 grand on a backup and recovery data center and said, yep, it's, it's amazing, it's great. And then we asked them, have you tested it? They said, no, it doesn't work. So they'd never actually they bought a solution that just didn't work and fit for what they needed. But again, having that process in place to, again, it comes down to the initial points, the preparation, the detection, the containment, having all of those elements in place will help you to potentially recover from an incident. And again, it's, as I know that from my role and focus on governance, but documentation is never going to be enough when it comes to incident response. And it's something we're seeing more and more now is, yes, you have the documentation there is a plan, but as I said, where do you end that incident response process? Do you have cyber insurance? And do you know that within there you have a process to follow? But there's a lot of cyber insurers now who will only let you alert to an incident through using their app. Now, how many people have got the app? That's one of the big questions you have in your preparation and review side of things. And something we see in some of the simulations we run is only one person has the app and nobody else does. So again, what happens if they leave? Third parties, as Matt said, who do you call if your IT company can't help forensics? Have you got somebody who you can reach out to? Certification requirements I've added in here because I think it's quite interesting to know. So when it comes to incident response, and I'm sure a lot of people here have heard of Cyber Essentials, ISO 27001, ASME, and all of that stuff. Cyber Essentials, whilst it puts the security controls in place, won't give you or won't ask you around your incident response process. It doesn't even talk about backups or anything like that. It's when you get to accreditations like IASME Cyber Assurance Level 1, ISO 27001, that's where you start to bring in around this sort of framework around how to manage incidents. And I think that's the maturity that people want to get to and aspire to make sure that they're sort of protected against incidents going forward. I said, having documentation in two places, that would be one of the absolute critical things from my point of view. So that if something does happen, you can still get that document as well. They're conscious of time and keeping you all here for longer. But I think one of the key things that we're seeing over a sort of a past probably year or so now is a rise in simulations that people want to run. So there's two ways you can do this really, and the ways that we do it as an NCSC assured provider. So you run a desktop simulation where you sit down around the room with all your key personnel and basically help you to shape your plan and make sure that the right people are involved, that you have a timeline of events, that you have your critical systems mapped out. There's always that sort of like discussion point and starting off point as well. Then when it gets to the live play scenario, so these are the most fun. So these are the simulations that we run where we basically go in almost like a Dungeons and Dragons situation. This event has happened. What do you do? And then walk them through a storyline of different incidents, which really, really helps to test what they do in a scenario. So there's two ways we do that. Either it's through a sort of a presentation. The ones that we really love are the technical ones. So we did one recently where we walked into a factory and basically sent phishing emails out to them live, saw who clicked on it, and then used the lockbit messaging that Matt flashed up earlier in his example and started flashing it up on people's screens to see how they'd react, what they would do, and then we started unplugging systems to see again how people would react, what they would do, and just that whole process around it to actually try and make it as there you go, as Keith put it, as savage as possible. It wasn't savage, it was a learning exercise and everyone enjoyed it. I mean, we even watched them on CCTV and could see people panicking in like the factory floor and stuff like that, which was it was good to see, and it helped to show them exactly what would happen in a particular instance. So they're probably more suited to mature organizations, but I think especially with what's going on at the moment, having that stimulation piece is vital to understanding what you would do in that situation really. I think one of the next poly that we'll send out, and hopefully it works now, and hopefully this means that you've listened to me and Matt talk to you for the last 40 minutes, is sort of what are some of the key elements of an efficient incident response plan? Now, this is a word cloud. You can write whatever you want in there. Please be polite, because otherwise I think marketing might shout at me. But again, what do you think are the key elements of an efficient incident response plan?
Pressure's on now.
Well, it says it's waiting on submission, so I think either people are so writing out so much
Oh, there you
or
go.
they're panicked. There you go. Defined, calm, roles, clear, organized. Oh, this is fun, isn't it? A plan. Yep, perfect. Thank you, David. Wargaming, methodical, recover. I mean, they're all exactly what we sort of practice, isn't it? And preach from our perspective, Matt, and from what you see. Um, having a
Yeah,
clear,
methodical. It really is, right? Because everything that we do has to take that kind of, you know, taking one piece at a time to really understand where something happened, and then again following that process to the T.
yeah, let's say clear process, documentation, tested, contact. So yeah, it's all things that we'd sort of recommend to people to be. I think clear is the overall winner there, isn't it? Organized, tested. So again, it's once you have that in place, then like we say, there's no silver bullet when it comes to anything like this with incidents. They're always going to be slightly different. There's always going to be some element of a curveball that comes in, which I'm sure like, Matt's seen quite a few of them. I've seen quite a few of them. Even the one of them where I think the company, this is a good couple of years ago, wasn't it, Matt, where they sent somebody on a jet across the world to secure something in another location. That is something you probably wouldn't write in your incident response plan because it's an unknown variable, but they knew who would be doing it, who would be able to get like all of these things that they had as a structure, and then yeah, off they went for a lovely little day trip around the world. And again, like I say, in a nutshell, it's everything that you've all written down there. It's having those policies in place, having something that's clear, defined, tested, reviewed, securely stored. It's everything that we've spoken about, myself and Matt now. Everything that you've sort of reiterated back to us, which is quite nice to know that you've maybe listened to me and Matt for a little bit. And it is that it's just having that structure in place, which we can't emphasize enough. I think the one of the and learning from it as well. I think that's one of the things I'll probably end on, Matt, is that post incident sort of analysis piece is so critical. I mean, we've seen one before, didn't we? With it was two incidents they had, didn't they, in the same
Hmm.
year?
Yeah, well, in about 2 months.
Yeah, and that
Oh,
was
well,
all big.
yeah, there's actually two of them, isn't it? Yeah, you got one who just impacted straight away, and the other one who just didn't, just recovered and yeah,
Didn't
didn't follow
didn't
any
le-
advice.
didn't follow the advice, didn't learn from their mistakes of how they didn't prepare for it. So again, it's to be hit once is not a nice situation. To be hit twice, you've got to really question how you've prepared for an incident in that situation. Um, and again, this is where sort of we come in and PureCyber. So we are an NCSC cyber incident exercise. I hate the phrasing of this cyber advisor, assured service provider. So we can run simulations that are NCSC sort of certified. It's always a great way of testing it, but we've got sort of four levels of what we would expect to see from people. So we can do things like host incident response plans, which is stuff we've started to do recently, where so instead of using a USB drive or a hard drive for people to securely store sort of copies of their incident response plan, we take care of it, put it in our environment, and then that's monitored by our SOC 24/7. So that if anything happens within your environment, we've still got a copy of your plan that you can use. The governance piece, again, helping to outline your policies, your procedures, helping to workshop them, making them fit for you as an organization, preparing for them. Again, that's all based around that simulation and seeing how you do operate when faced with a particular sort of task or situation. And again, the respond piece, which I think is really key at the moment, and Matt's doing a lot of this work from his team in the SOC, is having that sort of almost retain a situation where if you have an incident, you can call Matt any time of day, night, weekends, Christmas Day, basically any time, isn't it, Matt? And you're there
Yep.
to help and to guide them. Something that isn't added on here because it happened recently as well. So one of the team is now the ISO 22301 business continuity lead implementer certified. So can help to shape an instant response plan, business continuity plan as well, which is really, really interesting. Um, as I think we've gone way over the 30 minutes we allocated for actually talking, Matt. So I suppose we'll throw it open to the floor quickly around sort of if there's any questions from anyone, but they wanted to ask me and Matt while we're here. If it's how to work a poly properly, then we're probably not the best people for it. There's a slight panic as I was trying to do those, but do you think the ICO fines scare people from reporting breaches? Interesting. I would I would say, I mean it potentially is, Stefan, to be honest. It's I wonder whether it's the ICO fines, because I think the ICO, I mean we've dealt with them in the past. They're very they're probably calm and measured when it comes to incidents. If you've done things and put sort of protection in place, then they can see that you've tried to mitigate an incident. If you haven't, that's when the heftier fines are likely to come out. I would say, and I don't know if you agree, Matt, it's more of a reputational damage rather than the fines and the ICO that scare people. What do you reckon?
Yeah, 'cause I think it probably becomes a bit more public as soon as you're telling the ICO, potentially, because the ICO may force you to tell people, depending on the kind of criticality of the PII, if it is being exposed, because that's why you would really tell them. But honestly, I just recommend it full stop. Just tell them, right? It's not worth going, oh, maybe we don't need to, maybe we need to. Like, they will tell you, they will turn around to you and go, look, you don't really need to tell us about this. Thank you anyway. But, we don't deem this to be kind of high risk or critical in terms of incident. Just keep us up to date. That is the response I see most of the time. And yeah, and I suppose it is the fine, the monetary issue that scares people away, but I'm hoping it doesn't too much because the quicker you do it, the quicker you tell them, the better it is for you.
Yeah, and they help out, and they, like I said, Matt, they give
Yeah,
advice. They point you to the NCSD if you need to for any like guidance.
action
They'll point you to
fraud.
different people. Yeah, they are a very, very, I say, pragmatic and knowledgeable bunch. To be honest, to the ICO, from all the dealings we've had with them, they've always been really, really, yeah, so calm and measured is probably the best way of looking at it. Second question around Matt's mobile number. Sure thing, it's 0700000000. If we had an incident response plan or create an incident response plan, how often should we actually be testing, reviewing it? So I think when you look at accreditations and certifications and stuff like that, minimum's always going to be annually. That is usually what they'd expect to see from like a cyclical cycle of policy reviews. In theory, in my opinion, it should be when your systems change, when access changes, when somebody leaves a business, I think you should probably be reviewing it more often than that. But again, I suppose it depends on the complexity of the organization, how often it is likely to change, and the size of a team. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, Matt.
No, completely agree with that one.
That was easy.
Yeah, I leave you to decide how often. You just shout at me.
Yeah. Um, And what have we got there? So how do we decide, sorry, who needs to be in the room, plan during an incident? What if we're a very small organization? Again, really good question. You have to base it on what your resource is, I think is the best way of looking at it. Yes, you might be a small organization, but you might have one person who deals with the HR functions, for example. You might have another that deals with finance. And again, they're going to be the owners of their assets and their systems. So I think, you would probably have a small team, but then you'd bring people in when they need to be involved. But you would have them named as sort of the asset owners within that company. Um, what do you reckon?
Yeah, it's just making sure the key people are in the room, right? Whoever can make those decisions. And if you're a small organization, it's probably a bit simpler because it's probably going to be the owner of the business and potentially anyone else. You probably want to include your HR. And if you're lucky enough to have marketing, that's the person to have, and a technical person, really.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask this one to you as well, Max. I think this is probably more in line with you. What do you think of an
Is it meant to be
offline
an
backup? Yeah, I think
and
it's an
offline
offline backup.
backups?
So non-cloud backups.
Yeah, like I think the advice is to always take your data away from kind of, where it's able to be connected to. And that's the common mistake a lot of people have. I think I'm trying to remember the case study that we were looking at. They were keeping all their data and backups on the same-ish network, and unfortunately, those all got compromised. I think the best example of a backup location was a church's crypt. So they were paying the church to store all their backups, and if they ever needed it, they would just go down the road and go and grab them. So yeah, some fun stories there.
And then what level of cyber training should people who manage data security in a business have? Um, I think it depends on the size of the organization and your resource on what you're using. If I put it this way, if you were using a load of cloud systems and SaaS providers and stuff like that, then you're probably going to have less from a data security sort of training background because you're going to be putting all of your trust in those vendors and those third parties. Again, if you're building your own applications, doing your own development and stuff like that, then I would say you probably want to have more data security training in there. But I think as long as you've got the basics of, how long or where you store data, how you share it, and I think that would be it's all going to be dependent on business, really, isn't it? Again, Matt, I don't know
Yeah.
if you've got any thoughts.
No, like we get a lot of questions these days of, IT people going, well, I want to get into a bit of cyber, a bit of security just to increase or get a foundational knowledge in security more than anything. And totally recommended, right? It's good for everyone to know the basics of, backup strategies and how all these different terms. Cybersecurity is absolutely full of acronyms, and it's good to understand most of them, and they will just help you day to day, especially if in a more data security role.
Yeah. That's it. Is there any other questions that you can see? I was just going back to the word cloud to see if anything else is added in.
Um,
No?
that's everything.
Cool. I think that's everything from us today then. So I suppose to wrap up on today's session, obviously gone through quite a bit in terms of incident response. So there's a lot going out in the news at the moment as well. If you are concerned, have any questions, anything you want to chat to us about, then feel free to reach out and we can talk through everything. As previously mentioned, so the recording of a webinar will be sent to everyone on the webinar recording. If anything that's resonated with you, if you want to talk through anything, then reach out today or tomorrow. We're not precious. You don't have to do it today. We also have more instant response content that will be sent out as well as analysis on various cyber attacks, a bit of threat intelligence on the industry as well. I think for myself, thank you very much for joining us today. Matt, I don't know if you've got any final sign-offs you wanted to send, maybe a mobile number to people.
No, they'll probably know it already anyway. It's probably somewhere.
That's it. Brilliant. Well, yeah, thank you very much for joining us today. Have a lovely rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. Bye-bye.